Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Lately, I've been hearing people say things like, "He did what? This is unbelievable. What's going on? This is not what I want. This is not what we stand for." There's no denying long-standing rules are being broken left and right, and the world seems to have gone mad. How does the average person navigate a world in crisis? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Joining us this hour to consider the world situation and our options therein is Carolyn Baker. Carolyn was a psychotherapist in private practice for 20 years and a professor of psychology and history for 10. She's the author of 15 books, her latest, Undaunted, Living Fiercely into Climate Meltdown in an Authoritarian World. Carolyn has also co-authored 4 books with Andrew Harvey, including their latest, Radical Regeneration, Sacred Activism, and the Renewal of the World. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited about our conversation.
I am too. It's really interesting times, isn't it?
Oh man.
Yeah. May you live in interesting times.
Yes. Yes.
And we're clearly in a time of crisis. It's far
Absolutely.
from the first time, right?
Mhm.
But isn't it a little strong to see this as the eve of destruction?
Well, it depends on how you define eve of destruction. At the same time that destruction is happening, and it certainly is, I believe that there are other forces happening that are creative and intelligent and have the potential to bring us into the fullness of our humanity. That doesn't mean that I'm looking to some golden age that is appearing out of all of this, but rather that this is both, as we just said, crisis and opportunity.
They tend to go hand in hand if you look at it, right? Don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you see this time as different in the than challenges in the past? How do you see it differently?
Well, I think we have some things on board with us that we didn't have, say 500 or 1,000 years ago, in other times of demise. We have nuclear weapons, for one thing. We have technology for another thing that we didn't have in the past. And all of these can be, particularly technology, can be used for good or ill. Nuclear weapons, can't think of any good uses for those. Nuclear technology can be very useful, but we have a lot of things on board that we haven't had in the past. And we're really looking at the survival of the entire planet. We're not just looking at the survival of the human species, but are we going to go forward as a planet, or are we going to destroy it and bring it to its final demise?
Become another Mars, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So it seems like that we're small children playing with huge toys at this
Oh, yeah.
point, just
Oh,
by the lack of intelligence that's demonstrating
and the
itself.
lack of consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, for a while there, everybody was kind of on deck. Oh, we have to save the planet. We have to be responsible here. We have to turn this stuff around. And now we're hearing things from higher ups like drill, baby, drill.
That's right.
There seems to be no concern for the well-being of the planet or the people therein, just narcissism.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be restricted to one country or another, but we're certainly seeing it here. What's your take on all of that?
Well, I think we are coming up to the culmination of the collapse of industrial civilization and the paradigm that it's been based on. And I noticed in your graphics as I was coming on, all of the symbols that you have of connection and interconnectedness. And that is the opposite of what is taking place and what has brought us to our demise, which is the belief in separation, the belief in me against you, zero-sum game. And we're now facing the consequences, the full consequences of that belief. That's it in a nutshell. You know, we could both go into the details of that, but that's the bottom line.
In a time when astrologically it's supposed to be supporting unity, why are we seeing this separation and destruction so blatantly?
Well, because we've built this nightmare. We've created this over the last 500 years with the belief in industrialization, belief in capitalism, and I mean there are some good things about capitalism, but we've built our empires on separation and competition and superiority and disconnection from ourselves, from each other, and from the earth. And these are the consequences. We're reaping the results of that belief and that practice right now.
Well, there are supposed to be, government-wise checks and balances in place, okay, so that everybody played nice and followed the rules.
Mhm.
And even those seem to be failing us.
Well, yes, absolutely. And we now have people in power who never have really believed in our Constitution and the whole foundation and philosophy of democracy. It's all about me. It's all about what I can get and how I can control you so that you don't get anything. That's where all of this is stemming from. And it's really frightening because we don't have men in the White House. I would say we don't even have a broligarchy. We have boys. We have boys in the White House who are not mature men. And, they're playing with fire and they don't know what they're playing with.
Or maybe they do know what they're playing with and just don't care.
Exactly. Yeah, they really are. The consciousness is so low, if it's present at all. The consciousness is so low and so first chakra and so barbaric. And as I'm watching what's going on, this morning I started Googling. I grew up in the 50s, and in the 50s I was in grade school. So I remember a lot of things I heard about Russia in the 50s, which was then the Soviet Union. And so this morning I started Googling life in the Soviet Union. And, I reflected back, I Googled, but I also reflected on what I had learned about the Soviet Union in the 50s and the impoverishment of the people. You had professors and scientists and physicians who were completely unemployed, and they had to live together, many of them, because housing was so expensive and food was scarce. And on a good day, you might have a bowl of soup and a piece of bread. And I look at that, when I was a child, it's like, oh my God, this would never happen here. This is America. We have all this abundance. Yeah. And so now, as I watch thousands and millions of people being fired from their jobs, and now this trade war that Trump has inflicted on the Western Hemisphere, it's like that's entirely possible. It is entirely possible that we are being intentionally collapsed, intentionally impoverished. The people that aren't going to be impoverished, of course, are the oligarchs and the billionaires. But the rest of us, who knows? I'm not optimistic.
What's the purpose there? to impoverish us? What purpose does that serve?
Well, to make mountains of money, to steal from the poor, to enhance the wealthy. I mean, that's a simplification, but that's really what I see happening. The
Where's
purpose is
Rob?
power and control and making lots of money.
Where's Robin Hood when you need him?
Yeah, really.
So, um, so do you see this seeming destruction as serving a purpose at this point?
Yeah, it's serving a purpose to make lots of people wealthier than they already are and having power and control over the masses. Um, and, you have these boys like Elon Musk, who I think eventually would like to go to Mars. And, he's already building billionaire bunkers for his wives and children. And I think he would just like to get away from Earth. Earth is inconvenient because there's gravity, it pulls you down. You have to have common sense. You have to, like relate to the planet and its inhabitants. And I think he would just like to go to this place that doesn't require all that and just play. And he's got the money to do that. But I think it's all about getting away from the gravity of Earth. And I mean the emotional gravity, the spiritual gravity of Earth, and just being able to be up there above it in the clouds doing what you want to do forever.
Well, that can be arranged when we die, right?
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned first chakra. For those of us that may or may not be familiar with what that might mean, what do you mean by first chakra?
Well, the first chakra, and I'm not an expert on chakras, so bear with me. The first chakra is, located at the base of the spine. And in traditional Eastern philosophy, it has to do with just survival, just basic survival. Getting our needs met, like food and water and shelter. And it's, very animalistic. It's not above the level of animals trying to survive in the wild. And you can't have a complex and compassionate society or culture by living at the first chakra. So humans have developed other chakras that help us do that. But first chakra is very instinctual and all about survival only.
Well, I like the way the animals manage it better than the people.
Oh, certainly, certainly. Yeah,
Now, I've never seen an animal just go out of his way to take more than what he needs.
absolutely.
I've never seen
No,
that.
no, they don't hoard.
Hide and hoard and
Yeah,
dominate and
yeah,
dictate and all those fun things that humans seem to be
yeah,
very well versed in.
yeah.
Well, Carolyn, it's time for us to take a short station break. Carolyn and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org, and we're coming to you on the Exxon Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. What on earth is happening in the White House? With us this hour discussing our challenging times is Carolyn Baker, the author of Radical Regeneration, Sacred Activism, and The Renewal of the World, and Undaunted, Living Fiercely into Climate Meltdown in an Authoritarian World. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, we've touched into it a little bit about what is going on, and you lay a lot of blame for our current problems on Donald Trump and his second term, and he's accompanied by Elon Musk. Why do you see them as so dangerous to our planet?
Well, as I said earlier, they're boys. They have not. They're not initiated men. They've had no rite of passage that has brought them forth into mature manhood. And they're all about themselves. Um, Donald Trump's niece, Mary Trump, is a clinical psychologist. I follow her quite a bit. And she, has written and taught extensively about his childhood and what made him a narcissist. And there is nothing there except me. And there is a profound lack of conscience, a profound lack of right and wrong. And I don't know extensively about Elon Musk's childhood, but he was raised in apartheid South Africa. He appears to be extremely racist. And it's just all about me and what I can acquire, and the zero-sum game philosophy of it's me against you and I'm going to win no matter what. Interestingly, as we look at DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency, and these, again, boys who are deeply involved in the data and reducing government expenditures, supposedly. Some of them, I would say, are probably neurodivergent, and they do not have the same kind of empathy that a non-neurodivergent person might have.
Can we back up just a little? Can we back up just, would you please define yeah, that one.
Yeah, neurodivergent means some aspect of autism, some aspect of being, as they say, on the spectrum. And so I'm not an expert on that area of life, but it's for those kids, really all about just following the rules and performing the what is being asked of them in terms of the data, in terms of the computer evaluations. And there's a certain lack of empathy. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at these millions of people that are getting Social Security, and I'm just going to pull, reduce, cut, take away, with no feeling for the effect of that. Just, I'm a good boy and I'm doing a good job.
Well, that's pretty scary because, it's not like Social Security is welfare. Everyone paid into it. Their money is in there.
We all worked for it, you betcha. And still are for some people.
Yeah, exactly. So you speak of global psychosis. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a certain madness that industrial civilization has created. There's a wonderful book by an indigenous woman. Her name is Vanessa Andrade, and she is a professor at, her family came from Brazil, so there's a mixture of different indigenous cultures there. And she's a professor at, I believe it's the University of British Columbia, written this wonderful book called Hospicing Modernity. And it's about helping us who are not indigenous people let go of modernity, let go of the paradigm of industrial civilization. Now, that doesn't mean that we go back and live in the trees and the caves, but that as we see modernity and all that industrial civilization has created slipping away and the planet withering, that we consciously hospice this entitlement and this way of looking at the world that destroys the planet and each other and ourselves, that we begin to withdraw from that. And I talk a lot about, and so do many other people, acceptance of the collapse of industrial civilization. And that's a process. You don't just do that overnight. And one of the key factors in accepting any loss is the willingness to grieve, because grief is the doorway to acceptance. It's also the doorway to more joy. And our culture hasn't gotten that yet. William Blake said many hundreds of years ago, the deeper the sorrow, the greater the joy. And so I do a lot of workshops on grieving and experiencing joy. And without exception, I find that when people are able to really grieve deeply, their joy increases as well.
It's profound, isn't it? I know the Celts for
Yeah.
years, eons, have always talked about the joy, sorrow sine wave. That
Mm,
your willingness or ability to experience either one is limited by both.
right.
So yeah, if you're avoiding being sorrowful, then you're
Mhm.
putting a damper on your joy.
Exactly.
When you were talking about the industrialized society that well, you and I have lived in it since we were born.
Right.
And one of the practices within that seems to be build, 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 and to heck with it, what it's costing anybody for us to continue to do so.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it would appear that we've ridden that horse just about as far as we can, and she's going down, right?
Mhm.
Are we seeing the people hanging on to the very last dredges of it to the detriment of everyone at this point? This desperation,
Oh,
trying to flog this dead mule?
I think for the majority of the culture, yes, but there are many, and this is very encouraging. There are many people who have really had a change in consciousness about that over the last, I would say, 20, 30 years, and are wanting to build differently, are wanting to progress differently. It's very beautiful to watch that, and that's not going to save us. It gives us some information about how we might rebuild for those who are left, after the devastation. And don't ask me how long that's going to take. But there are some encouraging signs of how we can rebuild, how we can do things much differently. But by and large, the culture doesn't understand that or care to.
Seems like the entire culture is carrying a lot of narcissism, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And that's inevitable. We're filled with narcissism and entitlement in Western civilization because we haven't had to worry much about being compassionate and caring for others. But that's coming, trust me.
You speak like this major devastation is a done deal. That we're just going to have to face it and maybe pick up the pieces on the other side. Am I hearing you correctly? And if so,
Yes,
why?
yes.
Why are you looking at it that way?
Um, it's too late. It's just like Carol King. It's too late, baby. Um, we've really, if you look at the science of climate chaos, we've really passed so many tipping points that there is no way back if we're taking the same route that brought us to where we are. There is no route back. And I like the work of Vanessa Andrade and that whole notion of hospicing modernity, because in that we're also hospicing each other. Of course, we're all going to die, but uh, our ability to be there with each other and for each other in this demise is absolutely crucial. And that's part of what I think it's all about, is being able to be there for ourselves, for each other, and for the earth. That's the lesson, if you will, in this collapse.
And yet, during the collapse, it seems like the majority of the systems are just getting more grabby.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
rather than going, this hasn't worked, this isn't working. Maybe we need to look at it a little differently. But there doesn't seem to be any of that going on. And you mentioned that going back to indigenous ways, there's just too many of us for that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what's our third option here?
Well, for the entire culture, I don't know that there is a third option. But for individuals and communities, there's certainly the option to begin to consciously hospice these notions of modernity and entitlement in ourselves, and then seek to work together to create community. And that can look like a lot of different things. It might be an actual physical community. It might be a group of folks who meet online on a regular basis and really develop solid connections with each other. Um, those are options for us in the present moment. For the entire culture, I don't really have any hope of recovery or going back, but only for some individuals and communities to bring forth the newness of transformation of consciousness to help them going forward.
Do you feel that the more of us that participate in doing the inner work and participating in the transformation of consciousness, do you think that there's like the 100 monkey theory, like if enough of us do it, it's going to make a difference?
No, I don't. I don't buy into that at all.
A lot of people do, and
I know. I know. Um, I'm not worried about being the 100th monkey. I'm just focused on um, what what is this conflict, this collapse, this catastrophe trying to teach me? What is my work to learn from it? And then how do I reach out and assist other people with compassion and love? And how do I help take care of the earth as the earth is going extinct? Perhaps. So I don't buy these last minute 100th monkey, oh, there's going to be this great transformation of consciousness. I think that's rubbish. We got to deal with what's in front of us, and utopia is not in front of us.
So sitting around contemplating our navels and thinking good thoughts, you don't think that's going to get her done?
Not at all. Not at all. Now, sitting around and contemplating how we can help each other, how we can help our communities, and how we can evolve more spiritually and become more compassionate and kind people. Yes. And as a matter of fact, I am privileged here in Boulder, Colorado, to meet twice a month with a group of folks who are very collapse aware and are working to develop intimacy with each other and foster our spiritual and emotional growth, and then reach out into the community to awaken the community, but also lovingly support the community as we face what I think are going to be some real ecological and possibly economic crises in the future.
Well, it's
like you, I live.
Carolyn, it's time for us to take another station break.
Sure,
But we
sure.
will pick up with this on the other
Okay,
side.
sounds good.
We're going to continue this important discussion, so stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Is seeing the dark creating it? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the power of perception in our modern times is Carolyn Baker. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, what are the personal and collective shadows, and how do they play in here?
I want to talk about that, and then I want to get back to what I was about to say before the break, which has to do with creating community. But certainly the shadow. We are certainly a culture that has not dealt with the shadow. Carl Jung began to speak about the shadow back in the 1920s and 30s, perhaps even before then, talking about that part of ourselves that is very opposite of what we think of ourselves to be. The ego says, I'm a good person. We all want to believe that we're good people. But in reality, early in our childhoods, there were parts of us that we had to send away. because they weren't acceptable. And so those go into what Robert Bly called the big, long black bag of the shadow. And we keep stuffing things in there that are not acceptable to ourselves and to the people around us. Now, those things don't just lay in that bag and do nothing. Later in our lives, they begin to kind of have their own chemistry, and they very often in midlife and beyond erupt. And we go, oh my God, that's not me. You'll notice that how often people talk about our culture and say, well, that's not us. We're not like that. Well, I'm sorry, but that's exactly who we are. Because when we repress this shadow and don't deal with it directly, it does erupt. It does come out. And the reason it comes out is to plead with us to look at it and begin to accept those parts of us that we have sent away. And so America has a very large shadow, which I wrote about in my book, Dark Gold, The Human Shadow and the Global Crisis. And what we saw on Friday with the attack on Zelensky in the Oval Office was just a small metaphor for the way America has attacked a lot of cultures, a lot, and othered and made separate lots of cultures that really could have been beneficial to us if we hadn't been insistent on dominating them. So part of this collapse is we're going to be confronted with our shadow, and we're going to have to look at those parts of us that we've sent away and comes with them.
Do you think that we're actually looking at people embodying those shadows in our leadership at this point?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of walking shadows around in our administration, people who are the darkest of the dark. And of course, what happens with your shadow is you want to project that on other people. So, it's like, it ain't my fault. It's those immigrants. It's not about me and my administration. It's about the disabled. It's about the transgender. It's about women. It's about, whatever that is not me and that I can project my shadow on.
So instead of just being a ploy, it might actually be a unprocessed response.
It's a survival mechanism. It absolutely is. Yeah.
That's pretty scary. Well, let's back up a little bit. You were talking about creating community and
Yeah,
how important it is right now. Would you continue with that a little bit, please?
sure. Because there need to be some what to do's in this interview.
Yeah, but we've been doom and gloom. Let's hear some what to do's.
So when I first moved to Boulder, Colorado, I was talking about the collapse of industrial civilization many years ago. And when I moved here in 2009, Boulder's a pretty affluent community. And, there were lots of people running around who were just so optimistic. And, all you have to do is just live in Boulder and send your kids to Montessori schools and drive a Prius and collapse. There's no collapse here. Well, since then, we've had several wildfires, and one particularly in the middle of winter about 3 years ago that took out many houses and many lives, and really shook our community to the very depths. And so that notion of we're safe here has really begun to dissipate. Meanwhile, we've got Google and Amazon coming in here and being an asset to the community, but also being ultimately a huge threat. And so about 2 years ago, I got an email from a group of people, some I knew, some I didn't know, who said, you've been writing about collapse for a long time and we have awakened to it. Would you like to be part of our group that we're starting to support each other around, future catastrophes or whatever, and just support each other in the midst of this chaos? So I became part of that group 2 years ago, and we meet twice a month. And we've really developed some intimacy with each other. And we're now talking about starting a second group and expanding to real service in the community because we've established ourselves together as a base. So I have a column on Substack now. It's Carolyn's blog at Substack. And I just recently wrote an article on how to create a collapse support group. People might want to take a look at that. There are a lot of ways to do it. You can do it online, but doing it in person is really wonderful because you're actually there with each other. You're present with each other. So um, I'm excited about these kinds of creations of community that we can build with each other in the midst of this horrible demise.
Well, it strikes me that there's so much intelligence in that. If we're all sitting as separate individuals looking at what's going on, despair is the norm. Or
Exactly.
denial. I mean, one or the other. Neither
Yeah,
one is particularly helpful.
that's right.
However, we can't be controlled if we're self-sufficient.
That's
If
right.
we're self-sufficient emotionally, if we're
Mhm,
self-sufficient economically, if we
mhm,
grow our own food and,
mhm.
everybody does a little we have, community gardens where I'm at, and
Sure.
I'm really remote. And I'm not having problems with eggs because my neighbor has chickens and they
Right.
aren't
Of
sick
course.
yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got too big for our britches in a lot of ways, didn't we? And have lost
Yeah.
that core community.
Absolutely.
How do you think we can build that core in time that we have these pockets of people that can weather this?
I don't know about that. And I don't even know what weathering looks like. Um, I all I know is that we desperately need each other. We desperately need these pockets of community. Um, it's absolutely essential that we have those, that we create those with each other. I don't know the outcome. I'm not interested that much in outcomes these days because I don't know, and neither does anyone else.
If we don't have an outcome to focus on, can we create one? I mean, you know what I'm trying to say. That there's that talk about if you want to create it, you have to imagine it first.
Mhm.
Um, is that going to help us here at all,
Well, I think
or
we can imagine as much as we want, but I think we need to flow with what is happening within us and outside of us, and just be present with that. Um, and yeah, it doesn't hurt to imagine what we'd like to have. Like our group is imagining creating another group and maybe some local projects to help folks out. Um, will that happen? I don't know. That's an image to hold. But how invested in that am I? It's like we've got to get we've got to get over this. Oh, there's got to be an outcome, and if there's not an outcome, I failed. That doesn't work.
well, it's got
And
us here, didn't it?
what?
It got us here.
Yeah, yeah. And now we've outgrown that.
Right. And isn't this a lot of this growing pains? I mean, the systems are not efficient anymore. And
Yeah.
as this change washes over the planet and everyone, I think it's going to be so unprecedented as to we can't imagine what it's going to look like on the other side.
That's right.
Do
That's
you believe that trying to dictate what it looks like on the other side actually impinges rather than helps?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. I'm a big fan of staying in the present. Of course, past and future play a part, but our work right now is to stay as present as possible. And we need each other in order to do that. And we also need to take care of ourselves. We need time for recreation and play and just getting away from it all. 6 months ago, I was consuming a lot of news, particularly before the election. I was trying to be informed and see what was going on. And of course, I used to produce a daily news digest that compelled me to do that every day. And I no longer produce that digest for lots of reasons, but I'm now titrating or measuring the amount of news that I get every day, and I just can't stand to have as much news in my system as I did before. So I have some because I need to know a little bit of what's going on. Um, but then I spend lots of time doing other things, really getting into my work and getting into my friendships and my commitments to the world.
Well, it's kind of about perspective at this point, isn't it?
Yes, it
If
is.
we immerse ourselves in the news, which is of dubious accuracy, to be courteous,
Uh-huh.
then we're being controlled by it, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So when you build these communities, does it help with perspective? Because you can say what you believe, and then somebody else can say what they believe. And rather than fight about it and find differences, can we say, I can see your point of view. What do you think about this part of my
Mhm,
point of view?
mhm.
And come to
Yeah,
a third option?
yeah. It's collaboration rather than competition. Absolutely.
What a concept, Carol. What a concept.
I know. I know.
Um, we're about out of time in this segment, but what hope do you give people that and how do they start their own community?
Well, you can go to my Substack column and look at how to start a collapse support group. Um, but I would also say that it's time, and these are not um, opposed to one another. It's also time to do our inner work more and more. Now, people might say, "Oh, I've done so much inner work." Well, you haven't done your inner work in the context of the demise of the planet. And so I think that people need support for being clear eyed about what's happening and coming to a place of acceptance. So that's why I've written all the books I've written about this and why I offer life coaching for people who really would like to go more deeply and more um, consciously into how can they be of service at this time and what is this all bringing up for them that needs to be healed, and just making it um, much easier and fruitful, actually, to go through this process of demise.
Well, it's time for that promised break. Please stay with us as Carolyn and I continue to explore the global crisis. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Fine, save the world. Just don't take my comforts. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Carolyn Baker. Her website, carolynbaker.net. Carolyn, one thing I've noted over the years is that a lot of people can get on the bandwagon about, yeah, let's save the whales or whatever, just as long as it doesn't interfere with my luxuries.
Mhm.
Um, and we're kind of running into a problem with that at this point. Would you speak to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, this is why I like Vanessa Andrade's work and her book, Hospicing Modernity, because it really invites us to look deeply at our non Indigenous assumptions of entitlement. Not that we should all run out and try to become Indigenous people, that's not what it's about, but really looking at why do I think I can't live without certain things? Um, how limiting have been these beliefs of entitlement, and what difference would it make in my life if I had a more indigenous perspective that is in deep harmony with the earth, with others, and with myself? So that is where a lot of us need to focus right now, because I think we're going to be compelled externally, whether we like it or not, to give up lots of goodies. I mean, look at what happened today with this declaration of a tariff war and the slashing of jobs and the wrecking ball that this administration is now, wrecking ball and bulldozing that this administration is now doing. Um, enjoy those little entitlements while you have them, because they're going away. And we may end up, I'm not saying we will, but we may end up very much like the Soviet Union in the 80s, where on a good day, you got a bowl of soup and a piece of bread.
Well, it's not that long ago we were in the Great Depression, and the Great Depression was actually, from what I understand, partially created by fear, people running to the banks and pulling out their money. How
Absolutely.
much of that is going on now? I mean, how do we, I know we have to be realistic, but do we have to be careful about buying into the fear?
I think that's true in any situation where we're scared. We can't let fear run our lives, but we have the fear instinct for survival purposes. It's like we were born with the instinct of fear, and it keeps little kids from putting their hands on a hot stove once they're burned. It's just part of our humanity. It's just part of our survival instinct to pay attention to fear. Pay attention, don't be ruled by it, learn from it. But don't think that, oh, I shouldn't be fearful because I'm so spiritual. No, you're human. I'm sorry, you're human. And if anything, this time is really pulling us back to our basic humanity in a good way, in a really important way.
Now, let's face it is not time for spiritual bypassing, is it?
No, it is absolutely not. No.
You spoke of being earth connected as, a very important part of this transition for a lot of
Yes.
us.
Yes.
However, if you look at the masses, particularly in our culture, some people never touch the earth. They come out of their high rise, they go into their parking garage, they get into
Yep.
their vehicle, they drive it to work, they get out of the parking. They never touch the earth. They may, if they take a chance, time to go to a park, maybe. We have gotten so disconnected from the earth.
Yes.
What do you recommend for the individual to correct that?
Well, if you're open to it and you're not completely oblivious to connecting with the earth, there are a lot of little things you can do. A lot of folks who aren't necessarily in high rises can create a garden. They can have a garden. They can have a greenhouse. Maybe they can have chickens and share the eggs and products with a community. You can go to a park and just spend a little time sitting on the ground. Spend a little time backing up and leaning against a tree and just feeling what that's like for you. Touching, tactile, smelling, tasting different parts of nature. It can be very, very simple, or it can be as complicated as you want to get. But make a beginning, start small. And I tell people, can't have a garden because you live in an apartment? Well, get some green plants and start nurturing them. Very simple, but very profound.
Why do you think that's so important? How do you think that's going to change anything?
Because that's who we are. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. And indigenous people knew that, I'm not me separate from the earth. I'm me and that. I'm me and you. I'm me and that zebra over there. I can't exist without the other.
How true is that? It strikes me, we've gone to great lengths to acquire all sorts of things that are supposed to make us happy. And if we get enough money, we'll be secure and happy. And I don't see very many happy people out there.
No, I don't. No.
It seems like that concept has failed us.
Yeah. Well, I wrote this book with Andrew Harvey called Return to Joy. And one of the things we talked about in that book, and this is very important, is the difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is circumstantial. It's because I'm happy because I got a promotion. I'm happy because I got married. I'm happy because I had a child, and on and on and on. I'm happy because I won the lottery. But circumstances change that feeling of happiness. It comes and goes. Joy is another matter. Joy is something deep within our core that relates to who we are in our essence. And that's always with us. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz, wrote extensively about this, about how he found joy in the midst of horror. And so, even when we feel sad, and this is one of the relationships between joy and grief, we can access that joy, and we can reach down inside and touch that place of joy, and that sustains us as we navigate a lot of unhappiness from time to time.
Change gears just a little bit. You talk about birthing a new human in the age of extinction. Would you go into that for us?
Well, it's not about actually birthing a physical human. It's about transformation of consciousness. It's about becoming fully the human that we were designed to be. Um, it's um, it's what results when we do the inner work that we're being asked to do, and when we do the service in the world that we're being asked to do. And those two things go together. Right now is a time of incredible need for inner work and service. And you can't have one without the other. That's why Andrew and I talk about sacred activism, marrying spiritual and emotional development with our activism in the world. Can't have one without the other.
Otherwise, you just have that projection thing going on again, don't you?
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what would this new human look like?
I think it would be a person who is deeply connected with the earth in one way or other, who is aware that that is my origin. I'm not separate from it. I came from it. I need it in my life. I need to be able to experience it with other people because they too are part of the earth. And then it would be a person who has developed a lot of compassion and is willing to serve the earth community and the human community. A person who wants to move beyond their ego sense of what they have been enculturated to believe is them, and move to something greater and more expansive. I'm human, but I didn't know I was also divine, and really experiencing the fullness of both.
It's kind of mind-boggling how a lot of the people that we might assume are operating out of agenda are actually operating out of woundedness and shadow, um, ourselves included. And I can understand why you feel that the inner work needs to happen at least simultaneously, if not before the outer work does.
Mhm.
We're running out of time here. Do you feel that people need help with that? I mean, particularly with the inner work.
Yes, and that's the reason that I have been practicing coaching for a long time. I was a psychotherapist before that, and I think that in this time of collapse, people definitely need support for navigating it. I'm getting a lot more response right now because so many people are freaking out. I'm getting new clients. I'm getting invitations to do workshops, both online and in person, because people want support. We've never been here before. And it is a really daunting task to try to navigate this, which is why I wrote Undaunted.
Well, I wouldn't be complete if I didn't ask you, Carolyn, what's your mission?
I think I've stated it pretty clearly to do the inner work that I need to do right now and to serve the planet, the community, to care for, to have compassion for myself and all the living beings around me.
It's a beautiful mission, Carolyn, and you being on the planet doing what you're doing is so profound and so useful. Um, Thank you for being there and for sharing the time with us. Do you think we've been here before? I mean, I know that we haven't in recorded history, but there's certainly signs on the planet of major catastrophes, etc.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think we have. And, it's interesting. I love that word catastrophe because Stephen Jenkinson, who's one of the great grief mentors of the world, lives in Canada. He takes that word apart and he said, the first part of that word, kata, is a Greek word for going downward, for demise, for decline. And strophe is this word that kind of means weaving and connectedness. And so we are in a catastrophe where we need to descend willingly and consciously, hospicing humanity, um, and hospicing modernity, and then doing that together.
Well, it's that time. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Carolyn, thank you so much for all that you do and for coming on the show and sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me.
Our guest this hour has been Carolyn Baker, the author of 15 books, including Radical Regeneration, Sacred Activism, and the Renewal of the World, and Undaunted Living Fiercely into a Climate Meltdown of an Authoritarian World. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.